The electorate has sent a very, very clear message to politicians.
My party, to put it mildly, is going through a sort of phase of soul-searching and asking lots of difficult questions about exactly what we should do as a party.
The most talked-about radio show is here.
It was Nick Ferrari who challenged me months ago and said, why don't you go and have a pint with Savinsko? So there I go, dutifully do what you tell me.
Call Clegg, your direct line to Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Get straight through now. Leading Britain's conversation. This is Call Clegg with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Only on LBC.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 26th of June. That means it's time for Call Clegg with me, Nick Clegg, here on LBC. Taking your questions for the next half an hour. So do get in touch on 0345 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And of course you can watch on the website lbc.co.uk.
We only changed the number a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually I don't know, but many have made the same mistake, Deputy Prime Minister. Worry not.
I'll bring my specs in next time. Move on. The first caller, John in Pinner. Hello, John.
Yes, good morning, Nick.
Morning.
Don't you think it's hypocrisy of the government to be looking at the possibility of legislation to allow you to hack into our communications or electronic whilst pursuing the hacking trials still further and wasting our money?
Well, are you referring to the speech from Theresa May earlier in the week? Is that what you're...
Is this what we know as the Snoopers Charter, John? Is that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's been dubbed the Snoopers Charter,
sure.
But you put the handbrake on it.
Well, John, listen. On this, I mean, the Home Secretary, the Home Office, they can try and make their case as many times as they like, but this idea, which was the idea at the heart of the Snoopers Charter, that every single website that you visit, John, and every single website that anyone visits in this country is logged somewhere. That's just, that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen while I'm in government.
Why?
Because I don't think it is a proportionate response, and that's what I want to come to. That doesn't mean, of course, we need to constantly look about how we keep up with technologies. We talked on this programme before, for instance, about this issue of IP addresses, how you match them. We've just seen this court ruling in Europe, which government lawyers are now looking at. So, of course, you need to look at these specific issues. But I do not believe that the Snoopers Charter, namely logging people's websites, the websites they've visited for everybody across the whole country, is a proportionate response to this. And I personally also think we need to have a much wider review. We need to have more transparency, we have to have more checks and balances, so that as these surveillance powers develop, as no doubt they will do and must do in the years to come, because the security services and the police need the tools to do the job to keep us safe, they do so in a way in which John and everybody else has confidence in, and that it's properly held to account, and that it's properly scrutinised, and it's made properly transparent. And that's where I think we can still do a whole lot of extra work. And in fact, I've helped set up this big review from a think tank called RUSI, John, which is looking at all of this. So no to the, what I call the weblog Snoopers Charter. Yes, of course, to keeping up, with technology, but yes, also to much wider reforms to improve the accountability, the checks and balances, and the transparency with which these surveillance powers are used.
John.
Right. Well, thank you. If that turns out to be the case, then I'll be very pleased, but I have my doubts.
We shall see. Deputy Prime Minister, how many is it thought young zealots have gone from this country to training camps with ISIS and other radicals?
Well, you can't, of course, be totally scientific and precise about these figures, but, the estimates that, as you know, the government's talked about are around 400.
Around 400 that we know of?
That we know of, of course. There might
in time, they may seek to return to the United Kingdom.
They may well do, yeah. And some may come back and be entirely, how can I put it, entirely, law-abiding and have no... bad intentions, but others may
some might not.
Absolutely. And as we discussed before, I think it's one of the major things we need to deal with as a country.
So when you have some senior police officers speaking in favour of what's known as the Snoopers Charter, how come you know more than senior policemen and women?
I think you need to be precise. Just simply saying we need more powers without being precise, I don't think anyone in a democratic society thinks that the police and the security services should simply, without any scrutiny, no debate, be given all the powers that. I mean, in a sense, we might as well impose a curfew in London tonight. I'm sure that'll bring crime down. But we strike the right balance, don't we, in a democratic society? And I drew the line at this idea that every single website visited by you, Nick Ferrari, will be logged. Yeah. Well, okay, but I do have a problem that the state says to millions of our law-abiding citizens, where you go on the internet will be logged for a certain period of time. There are other issues, as I say, which of course you need to constantly look at, and I've been very open about the fact that as technology changes, we need to work with the security services, we need to work with the police, we need to work with Parliament if necessary, if changes are needed in the statute book, in order to make sure that they keep up with technological changes. I said before, IP addresses is an issue. There's now this legal question about how data is set aside in the first place because of this European Court of Justice ruling, which government lawyers are looking at. But I believe the way forward in all of this is that we have a top-to-toe review, so that we have greater transparency. We publish more of the material about what the intelligence agencies and the police do. We have better checks and balances. You have a better scrutiny of proposals with an eye on their impact on privacy and civil liberties. I think in that way you can move forward.
Is it as bad as hacking?
What?
If the government was to do this?
No, I think
snooping and hacking, are they the
well,
same?
no, because hacking is a criminal offence, and clearly the security. And this is really important to remember. However much you might have a debate, people like John and myself might have a debate about where the sort of the border is between privacy and civil liberties on the one hand, and security and public safety on the other. I'm absolutely convinced, and always have been, the security services work impeccably and meticulously within the letter and the rule of law.
And you've told the Home Secretary she's wrong, lastly, on this, have you?
Yes, I mean, but
oh dear, how did she respond to that?
Well, she wants to make the case, or appears to want to make the case, as I say, for a version of the Snoopers Charter where everybody's web logs are stored, where everybody's the websites they visit is stored in a way that I don't think is proportionate. Okay,
shall we move on? We have other calls.
Sure. Sanjay in Hounslow. Hello.
Hello. Good. A pleasure to speak to the two Nicks, legendary broadcaster Nick Ferrari and Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg.
Legendary politician, some would say. Yes.
Well, legendary politician.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Should we stop there then?
Yes, that's it. Nice call.
Thanks, Sanjay. See you later. Bye. Next.
Your question, Sanjay.
My understanding is that Nick Clegg did warn the Prime Minister David Cameron about high-level warnings about the risk of appointing Andy Coulson. And Ed Miliband is challenging, or has challenged yesterday, David Cameron about the reasons and whether an apology is enough, because there are still unanswered questions, it seems. Is the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, going to ask the Prime Minister why his warnings were seemingly ignored?
So Sanjay, the background to this is that before the general election, Andy Coulson was appointed by the Conservatives as the Conservative Party Director of Communications, whatever the title they gave him. Was it in 2007, I think?
Yes, I think it was.
And my party was highly critical of that at the time. Very critical. In fact, I remember Chris Huhne being particularly active in pointing out what he thought was the flaws in that decision. So,
well, he's always speedy to get on any of these cases.
Boom, boom. But then, of course, we were thrown together, if you like, into government. So it was hardly a secret, the fact that the Liberal Democrats were not, were because we'd been so critical of the appointment of Andy Coulson by the Conservative Party. It was hardly a surprise, in a sense, that questions would be raised about his appointment by the Prime Minister once we were in government. So it came up. It came up very early on, relatively briefly, frankly, because, as I said, our views on this had been so well established before the election, and David Cameron explained to me, as he's explained since, that he felt that he'd received the reassurances he needed for Andy Coulson to be appointed.
What persuaded you otherwise, Mr. Clegg? What did you know, possibly, that David Cameron didn't or chose to ignore? What had you been told?
Well, it is all a matter of public record. The controversy around the allegations, as they were then, of illegal phone hacking were quite well established before 2010. In fact, so much so that, as I say, the Liberal Democrats, we were very critical of the Conservative Party's appointment of Andy Coulson before he even came into government. But the point to Sanjay is that I thought then, as I think now, it wasn't, it's not for David Cameron to veto any appointments I make for people as my communications directors, and it's not for me to veto any appointments he makes. So, as I say, our reservations about Andy Coulson were well known. He then, repeated the explanation that he's now made publicly, but it was never a question of me seeking to kind of veto a decision, which it wasn't my position to veto, in the same way that I would never accept David Cameron saying, well, I'm sorry, you can't appoint so-and-so as your Director of Communications. I'd basically say, well, that's none of your business, thank you very much.
Sanjay, back to you.
I just want to say, I think the point's being missed. When Nick Clegg stood outside Downing Street in the Garden 4 years ago, he talked about fairness. So how can it be fair to give someone a job paying lots of money that seemingly wasn't advertised, and that person turned out not to be the best person, given that there were warnings anyway?
But Sanjay, the point I'm trying to make is that everybody has to be held to account for the decisions they make about the people they appoint. This was an appointment of the Prime Minister, in the same way that I make appointments as Deputy Prime Minister in my team. And
It's not really on his watch, Sanjay, in fairness. Mr. Clegg does not appoint Conservative people in... Do you see what it is? All right, Sanjay, thank you very much for that. Just staying with this story, Mr. Clegg, is it right to give a bloke a second chance?
In principle, I think you can, but when you give people a second chance, you've got to be sure that you're giving it, for the right reasons. And clearly the Prime Minister, as he said, felt that he did it with the right reassurances. Those reassurances, he has explained, did not turn out to be solid, to put it mildly. So he has now apologised for it. I think it's right that he has done. Should he have spoken about Andy Coulson when the jury is still considering two verdicts? Look, there's always a tension.
You wisely didn't, did you?
Well, look, he took legal advice, apparently. There's always this tension at the moment, particularly now in the kind of culture of 24-hour news. People want instant responses, instant explanations, instant apologies, and so on. And, of course, the wheels of justice turn a little bit more slowly. I'm sure the Prime Minister did not issue his apology in any way intending to create disruption, if you like, to the court
his
proceedings.
Statement, I think, not his apologies, you mean?
His statement.
Yeah.
And as I say, he took opinion. He took views.
But you didn't speak, did you?
No, but to be honest,
Well,
for the reason, no, I wasn't, and for the reason that we've just discussed with Sanjay, since it wasn't my decision. My views, my party views about Andy Coulson's appointment, even prior to government, are well known. It was not surprising that I was not being asked to make an instant statement.
We have more calls. Let's move on.
Graham in Croydon.
Good morning.
Hello, Graham.
Hello there. Can you give us an assurance that there is no one else working in Number 10 who has not been security cleared?
Look, the security clearance arrangements in Whitehall are obviously a matter for Sir Jeremy Hayward, the head of the civil service, and for those people who determine who has access to what information. So I'm afraid I don't have a list in my mind of exactly who has what kind of security clearance. The key thing is to make sure that people's security clearance is appropriate to the level of information they have access to.
Graham?
Well, I'm slightly disappointed by that, although I understand the correctness of your position, but could someone ask for Germany to say publicly or through you or through someone that there is definitely no one there who has not been security cleared?
So, as I say, you got to, when you say, Graham, Number 10 is a big chunk of Whitehall, so there'll be some people in that operation who just don't, as a matter of course anyway, have access to intelligence information or information which requires security clearance. So you'll have some people who just simply don't need security clearance. The response I was giving, which I'm not satisfied with, but it's just a description of what the security clearance system is there to do. It is there to ensure that those people who do need access to confidential information are cleared at the appropriate level. And it is the role of Sir Jeremy Hayward and of the civil service generally to make sure that security clearances on an individual basis match the information provided to those individuals. Simple as that.
Graham, thank you. Deputy Prime Minister, I wonder if I could put a couple of facts to you and then get your take on this. The when we talk about this hacking trial, the total cost to Scotland Yard, £32.7 million, £1.75 million cost to the taxpayer for the hacking trial, £18.7 million for the cost of Operation Weeting, 9.9 for Operation Eldon. On we go. Effortlessly, we move to around £60 million to discover that one newspaper editor, former editor, turned rogue. Was it worth it?
I don't think you can put a price tag on justice. If you start doing that, by the way, you'll go down a really dangerous slippery slope, because you'll start saying, do you know what? Because so and so has been able to pay very expensive lawyers to tie courts up in knots, all too expensive. Let's cut our losses and let's abandon justice altogether. Guess what will happen? The rich and the powerful will be let off the hook. And I abide by a simple principle, as we all should, that no one is above the law. And if you start attaching price tags to when you want to pursue cases or not, guess what will happen? The rich and the powerful will be above the law. So I really would caution against this argument.
Totally proportionate. The police investigation.
No. I'm just saying, if the moment you start declaring that you don't like this case because it's too expensive, but that one is okay, I'll tell you what will happen. It'll always be the rich and the powerful who will be able to evade the law, and that is, in my view, would be fatal to the rule of law, which is a bedrock of our society.
Well, not if cases are properly prosecuted. One could argue that the CPS hadn't done themselves any favours in this. That's
a completely different matter, but whether you think the CPS have prepared the ground well or not. What you're saying, which is that you think that above a certain arbitrary level, a trial becomes, or a court case, and indeed all the investigatory and prosecution costs attached to it, are too much. Well, if you do that, then it'll just be a field day for people to tie up the CPS, the courts, the judges, the jurors, the police up in knots, so that you can say, all right, do you know what? Let's abandon this, abandon justice.
Don't matter what I think. It's the 11 men on this jury, 11 men and women on this jury. They weren't particularly impressed, were they?
Sure, but that's justice. But justice is at the end of the day, it's one of the great things about our judicial system, is it's not actually the opinion of politicians or the CPS or the police or you or me or any powerful newspaper editor. It is the opinion of ordinary men and women on a jury, and that is the bedrock of our judicial system. It's something I'm immensely proud of, and I will defend to my dying breath. And to say, oh well, do you know what? We don't like this one because it's too expensive. I tell you, it would just be. I think if you point in that direction, you watch. People will get above the law, and it'll always be the rich and the powerful who avoid justice altogether, and that's something I would find unacceptable.
We move on to other calls.
Yep. Julia in Dagenham.
Oh, hi, Mr.
Hello.
Clegg. I've just got a question regarding zero contract hours.
Yeah.
I'm a carer.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked for the same agency for coming up for nearly 20 years. Originally we were on, as it was like temporary contracts. We was classed as temporary workers. Then our contracts changed to 0-hour contracts.
When was that, Julia? When?
About 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
So now what happens, to make a decent wage, because the work changes, obviously, in care, we have to work silly hours. So, for instance, some days I start work at 7, finish at 10. I'll have nothing all day. Then I have to go out to work at 10 o'clock at night and do a night shift. You're never guaranteed a wage, a realistic wage every week. You never know what you're going to get. It's not just care workers this is happening to. It's happening all over the country in different jobs. It's hard if you're on zero contract hours to get a mortgage because, again, you've not got...
the reliability of pay,
you haven't.
Yeah.
And it seems very, very unfair.
Yeah.
Let's get Mr. Clegg to this.
Julia, I mean, my heart goes out to you because I think particularly in the care sector, but other sectors as well, the situation you've described will be pretty familiar to a lot of people working in care. You obviously know much more about it, having been worked in the care sector for as long as you have, but this sense of insecurity, not quite knowing what the next week is going to bring, not knowing what your income's going to be from one month to the next, it instills an immense amount of insecurity. And what we're going to do, and Vince Cable announced this yesterday, is we're going to take action in Parliament to stop the most obvious abuse, and you'll be familiar with this, that people can be on zero contract hours where sometimes they're not even asked to work very much from one week to the next, but they're also prohibited. They're being stopped from working elsewhere. Well, that's ridiculous. You can't say to someone, we're not going to tell you how much you're going to work, but by the way, you can't work elsewhere. And that's called, in the jargon, the exclusivity of the zero contract hours. So we're going to end that, and then to hopefully address some of the things that you've talked about, Julia, we're going to work with trade unions and with employers and others to issue much, much clearer guidance to employers about how they should use the flexibility in zero contract hours in a responsible way. Because the one thing that, and we consulted on this, so lots of people wrote into Vince Cable and said, look, these are our views on zero contract hours. And one of the things we did discover, Julia, was that alongside the problem you've identified of an acute sense of insecurity about what your pay packet's going to look like from one month to the next, there were other people who said that they actually liked the flexibility for it. So there are, for instance, quite a lot of young people, students working part-time, who said that the flexibility suited them. Some older people as well said so. So we're trying to retain the flexibility which some people do appreciate, but seek to stamp out altogether the worst abuses, the exclusivity of contracts, and work with trade unions and employers to instil greater responsibility in how zero contract hours work. I hope, Julia, that will help you and many people like you.
All right, thank you for that. Now, we've got some breaking news here, Mr. Clegg. The radical Muslim preacher Abu Qatada has been found not guilty of terrorism offences by a court in Jordan over an alleged plot in 1998. He was put on trial after he was deported from this country in July last year. Abu Qatada first arrested in Britain over alleged terror connections in 2001 and then successfully deportation since 2005. Now not guilty. A quick response from you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I was first have heard of this, of course, and it was important that we sent Abu Qatada after frustratingly lengthy delays back to Jordan to face trial. I don't know the details of the court judgment.
I don't know.
I don't know whether there are other charges that he faces. But what is absolutely clear to me is that this man needed to face justice and needed to do so out of the United Kingdom, and that's what this government finally achieved.
He can't come back to UK, can he?
Well, we need to have a very close look at the court ruling, but we don't want this man back.
So we do everything we can to resist it.
Of course, we don't want this man back in England.
Emails. Jack in Lewisham. Do you think people are being unnecessarily criminalised for possession of drugs? This comes as Russell Brand, Stig, and you write Richard. I think it's Sir Richard Branson, actually.
Sting, not Stig.
Did I say Stig?
Stig in the Dump is an old children's book.
It's been a long night. I was with Boris Johnson until the late last night. I apologise. Russell Brand, Sting, and Sir Richard Branson are calling for drug possession to no longer be a crime. What is Nick Clegg's view?
I've long believed that we need to have a bigger look at our drug laws. I don't think we're winning the war on drugs. In fact, I think we're losing the war on drugs, and I think we need to think afresh. I, for instance, have long called for dealing with people who are addicted to drugs as a health issue just as much as a criminal justice issue. If you just chuck people into prison for a few weeks, all they end up doing is coming out even more addicted than before and even more in the grip of the criminals who gave them the drugs in the first place. You've got to break that cycle of addiction and criminality, and that's why I've called for a Royal Commission, which is a kind of grand label for a sort of good look at all of this. The Conservatives in the coalition don't want to do that, but I think this letter and so many other people besides just know that we can't carry on repeating the mistakes of the past, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the publication of a report that Norman Baker, the Liberal Democrat Minister in the Home Office, is in charge of, where we're looking at what other countries are doing to see whether we can learn lessons from Portugal, from New Zealand, from other countries, so that we can have a grown-up debate based on the evidence about how we can deal with drugs.
All right. What's the opposite of a grown-up debate? I always love that expression when politicians say grown-up. I always think that otherwise you get in a school playground, put on your shorts and... What's the opposite of a grown-up debate?
Oh, at the House of Parliament, I think.
Good answer.
There you go.
Good answer. Well, let's move on.
Barry in Bristol.
Good morning, Nick.
Hello, Barry.
We're told there's a $2 billion shortfall in the National Health Service budget. I wrote to the Minister of Health last year through my MP and told him how to save over £400 million, and nobody takes the slightest bit of notice.
How would you do that, Barry?
We have a stockpile of £424 million worth of Tamiflu, which we're burning and buying new, and we don't actually need to buy new. We can just test it and keep it until it loses its effectivity.
This may be the first, of course, that Mr. Clegg's heard of this, but no.
Tamiflu, right? I thought Tamiflu has a sort of sell-by date, doesn't it?
All drugs have a sell-by date, but that doesn't mean they lose their effectiveness at that. There's been a lot of research on it. The American forces spent, I think, $3.8 million testing their drugs and saved themselves $284 million.
Right.
Why can't we do the
Right.
same?
Well, I'm to put it mildly, I'm not a pharmaceutical sort of expert, and I'm sure.
Come.
No, Barry.
You're very handy with the cowpole. I know that.
You clearly are, and I genuinely defer to you and other experts on whether you think there is a way, in effect, what you're saying, where you can sort of lengthen the utility and effectiveness of drugs that otherwise are discarded altogether. Where I completely agree with you, Barry, is that the idea that we can't constantly strive to deliver excellent health services in the NHS, which is what all the people, the doctors, the nurses, the outstanding profession in the NHS do, but doing so in the most efficient way possible. Of course, we can always try and make it. I'm very, very struck every time I speak to constituents or friends who work in the NHS. They're always full of individual stories about we could save some money on this paperwork, or we could stop duplicating processes there, and so I think we can constantly try and save money in something as big and complex as the NHS. But as you equally know, Barry, what we're up against as a society, and by the way, this is something in common with all developed societies, we have an ageing population where people are living longer, which is great, but that means that we have an NHS which is having to cater for a population which is quite different to the population that existed when the NHS was born, and we're having people particularly ending up for far too long periods of time in hospital with age-related conditions. And what you need to do over time is try and make sure that people are kept as well as possible in their homes and their communities, and not simply put on this treadmill directly into hospital wards, which is not only often very expensive, but much more importantly, is not often the best way to keep people healthy in the first place.
Let's get Barry. Thank you. We move on.
Claire in Reigate. Hello, Claire.
Hi. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Absolutely horrified about Abu Qatada.
Yes. Well,
I'll say no more. And I felt so sorry for you yesterday in the House of Commons. I watched you.
I know. I kept a sphinx-like, expressionless demeanour.
If you were on your own, I would vote for you. I would never, ever vote for David Cameron. But I'm going to go on to another subject now.
Why did you feel sorry for Mr. Clegg, just out of interest?
Well, he looks so sad. He's tried his hardest, and he's a lovely, lovely person. But I think...
Claire, I am here. I mean, you talk me as if I'm not here. I mean,
like he's
hello,
dead.
I'm here.
Oh, we're going to miss him. He was a good man.
Claire, I'm talking to you.
Right. And so, well, look, thank you for the sympathy, Claire, but I'm actually much more chirpy than you imply.
No, but I just looked at you at the House of Commons yesterday, and I thought, you're going through all this stuff. If you were on your own...
Oh, listen, if I was Prime Minister, Claire, I'd love that. Well, listen, but the problem is I'm not Prime Minister, but...
But hold on a minute,
okay.
I want to go into something
all right.
else.
Okay.
All right.
What do you think about these advertisements for Wonga, for Bingo, for everything else? I can't believe all this stuff is putting on the TV and people are just duped into it. We might make some money.
You're talking about Wonga and where they've impersonated lawyers, effectively, are you, Claire? This latest story.
It's not just that.
Yeah.
It's not just that.
Right.
You've got advertisements for Bingo and what have you. Our country can't afford that. And you've got these people that think, oh, I might make some money.
Okay.
I think they should be banned.
All right, stay on the line.
Claire, listen to you. I'd love to meet you. You're obviously full of lots of great opinions. But
Only because she's got pity for you.
No, you should come on the show much. You should come on the show more often, Claire.
We might get the view from Claire more regularly. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Claire, hold hard. Let's hear what Mr. Clegg has to say.
Claire, can I just... My blood is just boiling when I heard this morning about Wonga. I just find it almost incredible. Faking lawyers' letters to people who owe Wonga money in order to basically dupe them into coughing up. I mean, it's just appalling. I'm so sort of shocked by this and so angry on behalf of the people who've been duped in this way. Now, Wonga are paying compensation. I wish, frankly, we could just impose some big sort of penalties and fines on them, but I'm told that because of the date of the case, the new powers where we can impose fines on Wonga don't apply to this particular case. But I really, Wonga a few months ago was trying to persuade us that it was a good sort of stand-up, entirely impeccable business. I just think they have more or less overnight destroyed their reputation for good governance and for being a reputable company by basically lying to people to get money out of them, and that is just reprehensible.
£50 compensation, of course. It's been worked out that if it was the other way round,
yes, on their interest rate,
it would be £12,000 that in fact they'd be paying back.
Exactly. As you know, we're doing a whole bunch of things to put some sense into this whole industry, not least by putting a cap on the interest rates, these sky high interest rates. But I really do think the people at Wonga need to look into their consciences and ask themselves whether they really have done enough through this compensation to address the harm and the hurt and the deep sense of offence that people will think that they were basically lied to in order to pay out money.
Claire, will you do me a favour? Will you promise to look at Mr. Clegg in next week's Prime Minister's questions?
I've got some walnut cake for him and a cup of tea.
Claire,
walnut cake and a cup of
Claire,
tea?
Next week I will think of a cup of tea and walnut cake at Prime Minister's question. When you see me smile from ear to ear, it's because I'm thinking about your walnut cake.
Well, I'm sure it's lovely walnut cake. Claire, thank you. Email question here. Lucy in Sittingbourne. A mother was refused time out of school for her son to go to her wedding. Is this extreme or is it fair? Are you aware of this case?
No, mother was...
So this was a case where a mother got married during term time. She works for the police force, as does her fiancé, now husband. They requested that the child came out of school for it. It was a 3-day wedding, and the school said primary school said he could not go. They said they hadn't been given enough notice, and 3 days was too long. Mum has subsequently taken the child. They've gone away for the wedding. She faces a fine.
I think it is extreme for a school, which does, by the way, even with the new rules, have the power in exceptional circumstances to allow a child to take some time off from school, not to allow that child to go to their mother's wedding. I have no idea whether 3 days, 2 days, 1 day is the right thing. But first I've heard of it. But you can't deny a child's right to go to their parents' wedding, for heaven's sake. And whilst the Department of Education has been encouraging and pushing schools to limit the amount of time that, for instance, children go off in term time on holidays, there is still the discretion available to head teachers to allow children to take some time off in exceptional circumstances. And your mum or your dad getting remarried seems to me to be, under anyone's sort of definition, an exceptional circumstance.
Let's move to at least one more question.
Final one. Yep, Sebastian in Harrow. Hello, Sebastian.
Morning. I still think you're young and you do a great job. Big fan. I want to talk to you.
You're young and you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Turning into the Clegg appreciation.
Do you know Claire, by the way? Do you know Claire, and do you have some walnut cake as well?
Yes. He lives next door.
I'd love to come and visit your street.
Listen, Nick, I want to talk to you about the housing market.
Yes.
It's grossly inflated, and it's only going to lead to big problems in the future. Okay.
Yeah.
This is not a new scenario, and it actually reflects back on Wonga and things that have happened in the past. Years ago, Margaret Thatcher deregularised the financial market. When she did that, I was working in the financial market, and we were anticipating, and it allowed financial institutions to rewrite their contracts, and the end result was they were able to finance fresh air. Okay.
I've got to move you to a question.
Able to finance what?
Fresh air. I've got to move you to a question, and it's a bit of a bad line. Your question, if you would, Sebastian.
Okay. There is a mechanism that's been used before by Parliament to regulate a market and bring it into line with reality. Is the government considering revaluating property in the UK to bring it in line with its true bricks and mortar value?
You're talking about council tax, aren't you? Sebastian, you're talking about council tax?
No, I'm talking about council valuations being bricks and mortar value of the property as opposed to fresh air.
Okay, Sebastian.
Right. Sebastian, to be honest, we can have a whole programme about this, and I understand Nick Nick Ferrari, that last night at your State of London debate, this came up again and again and again.
It's very much a hot issue in London.
I mean, look, Sebastian, there's so many bits and pieces to this. I mean, I thought you were referring to council tax, which, as you know, has not been revalued since, I think, 1991, 1992. As you know, by the way, but I don't think we're going to, change those council tax bands overnight. Where I do think there's a problem, as you know, is that it just makes no sense to have council tax bands that reach up to about 700,000, but there are no bands beyond that. I've never understood why someone in a family house in Lewisham pays the same council tax as a, Russian oligarch in a mansion of 7 million. But where I think the nub of this is this, Sebastian. Yes, you can regulate this, you can regulate that, you can upgrade this, you can upgrade that. And by the way, Mark Carney and the Bank of England have a really important role, and a newly strengthened role to put more stringency and more requirements and more caveats in how mortgages are provided in the first place, so we don't return to the bad old days in the run-up to 2008 where banks were lending money in a way that they shouldn't to people who frankly shouldn't have been borrowing money in the way they shouldn't. But the big problem we've had for generations is we just don't build enough homes. That is the fundamental problem. We just don't build enough homes. We're building roughly 125,000 homes a year at the moment. That doesn't get anywhere near meeting supply with demand, which is the reason why these prices go up and down like a yo-yo and go up and down in such a volatile way. And that's what I think what we should focus on day and night, Sebastian, is building more homes. And I would make two suggestions. I will leave you with two suggestions, Sebastian. Firstly, garden cities. It's been done before. Welwyn Garden City, Hatfield, the places like that. They were planned, big, settled communities with the right amenities, with the schools, the shops, the transport links, near London, not in London, but near London, where people want to live. And that relieves a lot of pressure in London and the South East. We've got to rediscover that ambition and build bigger garden cities. And I'm a massive advocate of that, and I hope I'll be able to make some announcements in the coming months about how we can make the next steps in building the next generation of garden cities. And secondly, once we've cleared the decks of this terrible deficit we've been carrying as a country for a long period of time, I think, unlike the Conservatives, we should give ourselves as the country the freedom, responsibly and prudently, if necessary, to borrow money on the state's books to invest in housing, so we build enough houses so that people have got a home that they can call their own, but also that we have financial stability and the banks don't go nuts again.
Finish with an email. Ron in Nottingham. I've been watching with great interest the story about Andy Coulson, the News of the World, and Rupert Murdoch. They were all over the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Does Nick Clegg feel left out?
Well,
did they court you, Mr. Clegg?
I don't think I can pretend that the Murdochs beat a path to my door. Of course, I met them, but it's one of the joys and privileges of being a Liberal Democrat leader, that you don't have very powerful media moguls.
Did Mrs. Clegg go to a pyjama party at Rebecca Brooks?
Not to my knowledge, okay. And if she was invited, I doubt she would go.
Luis Suarez, what happens to him?
Oh, I think sorry, I'm left slightly speechless. The guy's a genius. He's a complete genius as a footballer, but he's obviously got something wrong in his head. I mean, go around biting people. You can't have someone, however gifted he is, not being properly sanctioned. And I personally think we should call it a day. That's the last appearance in the World Cup, because I don't think he should carry on. It was outrageous. I mean, I've watched the replay. Particularly with my sons, who are obsessed by this subject, over and over again. We just clearly bore his teeth into this guy's shoulders. Yeah. It's outrageous. It should not happen, and he's got to face the consequences.
You're only saying that so Holland can win. Nick Clegg peering in. Call Clegg here on LBC. Mr. Clegg, thank you very much. News is next.
It's 9:37. Good morning, I'm Eleanor Noakes.